All right, we are back. What are your thoughts? Season 3, episode 10, here to talk about annuities. And before I jump into that, again, as always, I just wanted to say thanks to everyone that listens to the What Are Your Thoughts podcast. I've gotten some awesome feedback, lots of new downloads and plays over the past 5-6 months, and I just wanted to express some gratitude and thanks for people that are listening to the content that I put out. I put a lot of work into it, and I just wanted to say thanks. So thank you for that. Now, moving on to annuities. And before I jump into that, just speaking a little bit more about what I mentioned in the intro about just people having polarizing opinions, thoughts, and ideas about how annuities work and what they are and what they are not. And you see a lot of people, consumers and advisors, commenting in different forums and social media posts, etc., that absolutely hate annuities, or on the contrary to that, think annuities are the only solution for protecting a retiree's portfolio and plan. And I just want to say neither of those are true. Annuities are simply just a tool that can be used in certain situations if that investor or retiree understands what they're doing and what the purpose is for owning that product. There's also a lot of misconceptions about the types of commissions and amounts that people get from these products. So I'm going to talk about that. And then also I want to just make this final point that just because someone believes something is true doesn't make it actually true. So let's talk about annuities and how they work. So let's start with the basic form and just talk about basically making the analogy to Social Security, because I'll talk to clients and they'll say, yeah, I hate annuities. Or I'll talk to prospects and they'll say, oh my gosh, you brought up the word annuity. I had an old advisor that I didn't work with because they brought up annuity or annuities in general. And I'm just like, okay, well, let's take a step back and talk about Social Security and whether or not you like that. And I'll say, do you like Social Security or the concept of having income every single month? And they're like, well, yeah, I'm excited to claim Social Security. It's really going to help my retirement. And I'll say, okay, great. Well, by definition, Social Security is an annuity. And they're like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, a pension is an annuity. Well, what do you mean? Basically, in its most basic form, an annuity is a stream of payments that is paid to the annuitant or the person that receives that income for a certain period of time. It can be a certain number of years. It can be a person's lifetime. It can be a couple's lifetime. It could be a grandparent and a grandchild's lifetime that they can get these payouts. So just the concept of what an annuity is, it's just a stream of payments that is paid out over a certain amount of time. And the person that buys said annuity can decide how long, generally speaking, that they get those payments for. And it's the same with Social Security and the same with pensions, right? If someone has a pension, they can either take a lump sum or they can take a stream of payments over the course of time. Whereas where it might differ in Social Security land, the government doesn't let you take a lump sum, but throughout your working life, you saved money or you paid tax essentially into a pool of money that pays out all retirees in the United States that qualify for Social Security. Now, I'm not going to get into the specifics of, people saying, oh, Social Security won't be there after 2032, 33, 34, whatever the year is. It's going to go bankrupt and this and that. Right now, we're just going to talk about how these systems work in terms of the payouts for different retirees and when they claim that annuity stream of payments. So Social Security, pensions, annuities, you can kind of lump them into the same bucket as in terms of just income generation in retirement and how people generate that income. Now, what is an annuity? Basically, you as the investor or the retiree, let's start with the most basic form, which is just income generation. So the simplest annuity is that you can purchase that product, an annuity product, from an insurance company, and they pay out a monthly or quarterly or semi-annually or annually payment to you for a certain amount of time. So in this example, let's just talk about someone that deposits $200,000, or let's make it $100,000 just to make math easy, into an annuity, and it generates a stream of payments for them for the rest of their life. Now, what happens to that $100,000? This is a huge, issue and thought for a lot of people that are considering these strategies, just knowing that in its most basic form, we call it a SPIA, a single premium immediate annuity, or a single premium deferred annuity, SPDA, that if someone puts that $100,000 in, that $100,000 is now off of their balance sheet, meaning that it's now the insurance companies, and you traded that in for a stream of payments for a certain amount of time, which could be the rest of your life. And that's the example that I'm going to use, is just that, we'll have a single person that buys an annuity with $100,000, and they say, okay, pay monthly payments to me for the rest of my life. Well, the insurance company will base that off of their current age, their current life expectancy, and then it will decide how much monthly income they can generate out of that $100,000. Now, in terms of just comparing and contrasting, like with the 4% rule, if someone, had $100,000 in a portfolio and they plan to take out 4% in their first year of retirement, that's $4,000. Well, an annuity company, generally speaking, would be able to offer more than that 4% payout for the rest of that person's life. And the reason for that, in terms of just percentages, let's say that they offer, instead of $4,000 in a given year, they would offer maybe $4,800, right? Which is a 4.8% payout, or they might offer $5,000 depending on the person's age or more. What I'm trying to explain here is that the reasoning behind why they can offer more in terms of payout percentage, right? This is different than rate of return. This is a payout percentage, which I've talked about in previous parts of this retirement series, is that we're talking about a payout percentage versus rate of return. The reason they can offer that is because they have basically pooled all of the people that bought the annuities. They have pooled them into a pot of money. And once you get enough people, you can do the math, and the actuaries do the math on, okay, we know the average life expectancy of everybody in this pool. So we know that half are going to die before that average and half are going to die after. We just don't know which ones. However, we do know that once the pot of money and the number of people is large enough, we can base the payout rate on that factor. And the classic example of that is an example from one of the, I guess, maybe most well-known annuity people in the industry. His name's Tom Hegna. And he talks about this example where 5 people go on vacation and they're in retirement, and they all say, hey, let's put $100 into a jar and we'll just let it sit there. And then next year we'll come back on the same vacation and we will do something with the money that we put into the jar. Well, fast forward to the next year, and they are on vacation again, but instead of 5 people, one of them unfortunately has passed away, and now there's only 4. Well, what happened with the money in that jar? It just sat in the jar, and it wasn't exposed to any stock market risk or anything like that. However, the 4 people now have $500 to split. So each of them can get their original 100 back, and then they have $100 more in the jar to split 4 ways. So now each of them have $125. So that's a positive return on their $100 without any exposure to any type of market risk. So that's the basic premise behind how those annuity strategies work. And a lot of times that return in that $100 vacation jar example is called mortality credits. Basically, you are putting your money into this pot with a bunch of other people, and there are basically mortality credits for the longer that you live. Now, the classic thing that people would say back to that is, well, yeah, I put this $100,000 in, but what if I die in year 2 of getting the payouts? Well, you can design the annuity contract up front where you can stipulate how much of the money will be returned to you or a beneficiary. You can set up what they call a cash refund. So if you put $100,000 in and you pass away before the $100,000 total amount has been paid out, then the difference, let's say it had paid you out $10,000 and then you pass away, well, you can set it up to where the $90,000 that is remaining would go to a beneficiary. You can set up to where it pays for a certain number of years. So example, you can put a 10-year, what they call period certain on there, which guarantees that that annuity will pay out for 10 years, whether or not you are alive or dead. So you can add different types of rules onto the contract to make it where no matter what, you or a beneficiary will at least get back what you've put into that annuity. And there's a lot of misconceptions, right? Like you put the money in and it's just, gone no matter what forever. If you pass away in the first year, then you're, SOL. Well, you could buy an annuity like that, but if you're working with a competent annuity advisor, they would discuss your goals and hopefully go through what you would want in the event that you would pass away prior to all of the money getting paid out. So that's just an annuity in its basic form. And there's a lot more caveats to it, right? Like you can add a spouse or a joint annuitant on the contract with you where it would pay out for the remainder of both of your lives. You could add an inflation adjuster onto the contract, and you could say, okay, in the beginning, maybe it starts at, that same $100,000 example, maybe it starts at $3,800 per year, right? That's lower than the 4% rule. That would be a 3.8% payout, but you get a 3% cost of living adjustment each year on the monthly payment from the annuity. So that's a way to help keep pace with inflation. So then your overall payout rate would essentially, in year 2, you'd have a higher payout than that $3,800. So there's ways to design those single premium annuities that are able to have a slice of income that is guaranteed for a retiree. Now, I know I've talked about the retirement income style awareness survey that WAYT developed, and that safety first versus probability based. So annuities are safety first, right? They offer guarantees. Well, who might they be good for? People that like knowing that they have some type of guaranteed income for the rest of their lives, and that they don't want invested, and they don't want to have that segment of their portfolio that is subject to volatility in the market. Now, what would some other people say? They'd say, oh, well, you can earn a better return in the market and just, look at history. You can take out 4% per year when inflation adjusted every single year. Well, there's a certain segment of people that don't care, right? They just don't want the volatility. They want to know that they have the guaranteed income for the rest of their life. Does it mathematically optimize the strategy? We don't know, right? People can say, oh, you can earn a better return. Historically, yeah, you might have been able to earn a better return. However, there's a segment of people that don't care. They just want to spend the money that they've worked hard to save, know that it's going to show up every single month, and have that peace of mind moving forward that they can live to be 120 years old and still make sure they never run out of money. Does that mean that people should put 100% of their savings into an annuity? Probably not. But for the people that prefer a safety first style to their retirement income and solving that puzzle, they can be a tool that is used well. So that's just a basic annuity payment in general, right? That's just how the income portion works. Now, moving on to another type of annuity that is a little bit more confused. It's a little bit more confusing. There's definitely more levers that one can pull, and different companies have different little quirks to make them more competitive, and just different things inside of the contract that the insured buys. But basically, the other form that is really, really popular today is what we call a fixed indexed annuity, or an equity indexed annuity. And what those are is that they can be designed for growth. They can be designed for income. They can be designed for a little bit of both. And there's different companies out there, like I said, that have different little quirks and bonuses and rules and things like that. But basically, as we're thinking about what these products are, if we were to just put a couple sentences on them, right, we would think about them as a way for a retiree or someone on the cusp of retirement to earn a mid to low single digit return for a segment of dollars in their portfolio, all while not being subject to market risk. Now, that can sound appealing for certain people. Again, people that are more on that scale of the safety first scale. But let's say that someone puts, $100,000 into a fixed index annuity. Well, the indexed part, basically means that their $100,000 it's linked to an indexed or an index of their choice, right? An index, what I mean by that is like the S&P 500 or the NASDAQ or the Dow Jones or something like that, where they are not directly invested in the index. However, they participate in a portion of the gains, of the potential gains of that index. But if the return of the index is zero or negative in whatever, period that they pick, like you can allocate like a 1 year option in a fixed index annuity, right? You can say, okay, let's look at, they call it point to point. Let's look at 1 point, and then 12 months later, look at where the index is at that point. And if there's a positive return, the client would get, a percentage of that positive return. But if the return was zero or negative, the annuity would credit 0%. So it wouldn't go down in the terms of market risk. And some people really enjoy that. They say, okay, the years where it's zero or negative, even though that, historically they have happened a lower percentage of the time than the indexes have been positive, we don't want to have any loss of principal in, this $100,000 segment of our portfolio, or whatever the number is. Again, I'm just sticking with that $100,000 purchase of an annuity. So they say, okay, let's allocate, 50% of the money to 1 year S&P 500 index, and then the other 50% to a 1 year NASDAQ index. Well, they would have 50,000 of their portfolio linked to the S&P 500 index and 50% linked to NASDAQ. And they would look, generally what happens is they look at one point and then they look at another point and see, they being the insurance company, see how that annuity or how that index performed rather, and then they credit the annuity with a percentage of that gain, or they credit it with a 0. Now, in terms of liquidity, remember we were talking about the SPIA being illiquid, meaning if you gave that $100,000 to the insurance company, it's off of your balance sheet. With the fixed index annuities, they generally use a type of surrender schedule, and that can range, 5, 7, 10, 12, 15 year in terms of surrender charges. So if you put 100 in and there's a 12% or 10% surrender charge, then if you cashed it out, that would cost you $10,000. So before you purchase these, make sure that you understand the withdrawal schedule and the charges that one could get charged in this strategy. But there is a level of liquidity, and that's where this can differ. The first way that it can differ from just a classic single premium annuity. Now, looking at, again, just thinking about structure wise. So they have the ability to share in the index, like I mentioned, and also have the ability to get some single digit growth, right? By doing so. And they have that liquidity element. Now there's generally rules for, you can take up to a certain percentage in any given year out of the annuity without surrender charges while you're still in that first, few years of the contract, where a lot of times they'll say you can take a 10% free withdrawal. So if you had an emergency and needed, $8,000 for something, generally speaking, in a lot of different annuities, you'd be able to take some of that money out. So that differs, right, from that single premium annuity that I mentioned earlier. Now, on top of that, there's different little quirks, like I said. So these companies are not dumb, right? They're for-profit companies. So a lot of times they will put caps on the return, right? If you're going to guarantee that, if the market goes down, you're only credited with a 0% gain, then there's a cost for that, right? And even if it's not, with like a 1% per year fee or something like that, they cap the upside on the return. So a lot of times companies will say, okay, we're going to cap this at 5% or 6% or whatever the caps are. They're constantly changing, but let's just use 5%. Well, if we have another year like 2021 where the market's up 20 something percent, the dollars that would be in your annuity would hit the cap and be up 5%, right? If we used 5% as a cap. So that's something to think about, right? And again, this strategy is for people that are leaning more toward the safety first approach, and they understand that there's pros and cons to every decision in finance. If they aren't willing to accept that and they're pissed off that the market went up 20 something percent and they only got 5, well, then that's probably not the best decision for them. But if they're happy that, in 2022 thus far, if the market finished the end of the, year at down whatever, right, down 10% or whatever the number is, and they got credited with 0 and they're really, really happy, then that could be a potential solution and fit for that client. It really just depends. There's pros and cons. Well, in addition to the caps, there could also be a spread, right? That you could say, okay, one of the allocation options could be that they will not have a cap, but they'll have a spread, which means like in 2021, let's say, the market was up 25%, but if there's a 5% spread on that strategy, well, that would basically be 5% off the top of whatever that return is. So they wouldn't cap your return, but they would take a percentage off of whatever return that was received or credited from that index. So as you can see, things are getting a little bit more complex, and you just want to make sure that you understand what's going on within these contracts. Another type of, term inside of the contract could be a participation rate. So if an index has a 90% participation rate in the return of the index, and the index returns 10%, you would get credited with 9 because it only participates in 90% of the return. As you can see, these are getting, a little bit more complex than just your classic, hey, deposit money and give me a payout. These are, I don't even know if annuity is the best term for them, but that's what they are. But basically, they're a way to hedge against some downside in the market and participate in some upside, knowing that you probably won't get market-like returns long term, but it's a way to protect principal. And then what annuity companies will do is offer an income rider, which could be included in the contract, or it could there could be a fee for it, right? Like a 1% per year fee based on that ability to annuitize or pensionize that income at a later date. So let's say you put $100,000 in, you let it sit for 5 years, and, over that time, based on, how your annuity's been credited based on the index performance, let's say that it's up to, $125,000. Well, the annuity company might say, or if you had an income rider on it, you could say, okay, let's turn this 125,000 or whatever the number is that based on the index crediting, let's turn that into a guaranteed income source for life. So it's a way to, like, let's say that, let's put like a real world example into this, right? Like if someone was on the cusp of retirement and they knew that, they wanted to have guaranteed income starting in 5 years, 7 years, whatever the number is, they could say, okay, let's make sure that this $100,000 is accounted for, and we're going to segment that for our guaranteed income stream. So let's buy an annuity. Let's let it grow for 5 years based on, low to mid single digit returns based on indexes. And then we'll pensionize it in 5 to 7 years. But that gives them peace of mind that they can count on having that piece of their income for retirement for the rest of their life. Now, in that retirement guide that I talked about last episode, I created a retirement guide that covers some of these topics more in depth. If you want that, just email me, info@lifepointplanning.com. I can share that with you, and it goes into all these different terms a little bit more in depth. But basically, there's participation rates, there's spreads, there's caps, there's different terms inside of the right. There's bonuses, right? Sometimes annuity companies will say, hey, you deposit 100,000, we'll give you a 20% bonus for your income value, when you annuitize it. That's different from your account value if you were to cash it out. An income value is what, the value or the bucket, right? If there's two separate buckets, that's the bucket that they'd calculate the lifetime income on. But the cash value or the accumulated value, the amount that you'd get if you were to surrender the contract, that's a different value. So you really want to make sure that you know what you're buying. But in the most basic and simple form, it is a way for retirees or people on the cusp of retirement to hedge some downturns in the market while earning a mid to low single-digit return. Again, is that for everybody? No, absolutely not. Is it for people that prefer that more safety first style of retirement income? It could be. And it's important to identify that style first to know if you're even in the ballpark of where this annuity strategy might make sense. Now, on top of that, I talked about this in the beginning, but talking about commissions. Well, there's misconceptions, and I'm in some Facebook groups with consumers and advisors, and a lot of times annuities get brought up and people are like, avoid, there's fees. In that retirement guide that I created, I put in there an actual example of an annuity where there are not any year-to-year fees inside of the contract. It's right there, guaranteed on the illustration. In this case, a client puts $100,000 in, and that $100,000, if the market credits 0% for 20 straight years, they still had that $100,000 in the account. Now, I guess just, they're often missold and misrepresented, right? And the classic example is if it's the only tool, if it's the only tool in someone's toolbox, right? If it's a hammer, everything looks like a nail. I know I screwed up that analogy, but that's the idea, is just that, people that are selling these things sometimes just look at, let's sell the benefits. But there's pros and cons to every single decision that is made in financial planning. So you have to really know your style of retirement before you select on which product or strategy to use. So back to commissions. So for the first type of annuity, that single premium annuity, the commissions are not super high relative to the commissions on the indexed annuities, where you might get 2 to 4% commission on the total deposited amount. So if someone deposits $100,000, the agent might receive $2,000 to $4,000. That said, that commission is already reflected in your payout amount. So let's say that you deposit $100,000 and it's going to pay out $5,000 per year to you. That $5,000 is net, right? It's net of commissions. It means that you're going to get that $5,000 no matter what, and the insurance agent doesn't get, a portion of that $5,000 payout, right? You still get your money. Now, with indexed annuities, you can select different types of commission structures for payouts on those contracts. So the same case, let's say that a client puts in $100,000 into that annuity. The commission might be 6.5% or $6,500, but in your illustration that you're looking at, that commission is paid by the insurance company, and how they back that up is basically with the withdrawal surrender charge schedule. Remember how I mentioned it can be, 5, 7, 10, 12, 15 years in terms of surrender charges. Well, the insurance company knows that if the client surrenders or cancels that contract early, the client would pay a surrender charge, and they would basically replace that money that was paid to the agent in terms of commission when the client bought that contract. So same $100,000 example. It's not like you buy an annuity for $100,000 and then all of a sudden $93,500 shows up in the contract. That's not how they work. The commission is paid by the insurance company, but there is a commission paid. Now, there's another option that people can use, agents can use in selecting the commissions, where in fact you could do you could do a commission option that's equivalent to a 1% commission in year one with a 1% commission each year thereafter, which is very similar to another type of fee structure in the marketplace, which is a 1% asset management fee that a lot of advisors charge. Now, the difference there is that the 1% trail on the annuity contract year over year is not deducted directly from your balance as the retiree, where it would be deducted from your account as an asset management fee from an advisor. So if we're comparing just a 1% fee over time, right, that's again paid by the annuity company. And the way that they back that up, let's say you had a contract for 20 years and you never pensionized it and the advisor just kept getting 1%. Well, remember years like 2020 and 2021 where they capped your return at 5%, but the market was up 20 something. Well, they pocketed that return. So therefore, like I said, they're not losing money on these. That's logistically how they work. They pocket the difference and then they're able to utilize that for the future essentially. And specifically in years, they probably siphon it off for commission recovery, admin expenses, years that the clients get a zero return, even though the market's down, right? They could, basically acorn away some of those positive returning years that are over and above the cap. So commission wise is not necessarily the first thing that I would ask as a consumer, like, oh, what do you get paid on this? It definitely is important. And, it provides incentive for agents to sell them. But if I were to make that recommendation to a client to buy an annuity, and even if I disclose the commission, right, it's like, okay, well, how does this actually fit into your overall plan, right? And ask the advisor, hey, how would this strategy benefit me and what are the pros and cons, right? Is there mathematically a better solution? Or even if there is a mathematically better solution for this, how does this make sense to me based on my specific retirement style? And how will this help me have some peace of mind knowing that this strategy will help my overall retirement outcome? Those are the important questions to ask. And really, you can get different annuities with different goals in the marketplace, but commission-wise, yes, it's important, but not as important as people seem to think. On top of that, fees-wise, yes, there are certain riders, like income riders inside of different annuities that do charge fees, so you want to be mindful of those. And there are, riders that are included in the contract that don't have a 1% or more annual fee inside of them. So developing that strategy with someone that knows what they're doing and structuring these products is super key. But it all, again, and I'll finish up and wrap up this episode with this, is that it all comes back to your retirement style. It's super important to know what makes sense for you specifically. Are you more safety first? Are you more probability based? Do you want optionality? Or are you happy with more of a commitment based strategy? And then you can decide what would make the most sense in terms of how you solve that retirement consumption puzzle. If you have any questions on this complex topic, please reach out and let me know. I'm happy to answer any questions that you want. I'm happy to send my retirement income and planning guide, and happy to really discuss any type of product or solution that is being offered and recommended to you by your current advisor. So next episode, I will wrap up this retirement series talking about defined outcome ETFs. And I know I've mentioned them briefly, in the history of all these podcasts that I've done, but it's important to talk about, okay, where might those fit? Because they are a legitimate strategy that don't use annuities, but offer a hedge to the downside and some upside potential. And they are used in an ETF form. I'll talk more about that next time. As always, thanks so much for being here. info@lifepointplanning.com if you have questions or want that retirement guide, and I look forward to catching everyone next time. Thanks for listening.